One is a surprisingly relevant black and white comedy about deliberately managing money poorly. The other is pretty much the same, but with more baseball. Like, a lot more baseball. Brewster's Millions, They Remade It.
Gone are my blues and gone are my tears. I've got good news to shout in your ears. The long-lost dollar has come back to the fold. With silver you can turn your dreams to gold. Oh, we're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along. We're in the money, the sky is sunny. Oh man, depression, you are through, you done us wrong. Oh, we never see headline about red line today. And when we see the landlord,
Hi, welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
Another just run-of-the-mill day, another run-of-the-mill episode. Nothing bad's going on at all. Nothing at all.
Pretty lazy day, I must say, except for all the work that I did at my job where I work.
Yeah, me too. Because as hard as it is to believe, this is not exactly a lucrative venture we do on this show.
I do it because I like it.
Yeah.
But I saw I saw a stat. Now, we started this show like 2 years ago because it was in 2018. So it's been over 2 years. But
yeah.
We did start it in 2018. And I saw a statistic either today or yesterday where it was like 192,000 new podcasts have been created since the start of 2019, I guess.
Jesus.
So at least 200,000, I would say, have started since we aired our first episode and started.
Yeah. So we are not even a drop in the bucket.
Not even, but we're still doing it. There are plenty of podcasts where I'll be actively looking for something new to listen to, and for every one good podcast on like 80s horror movies, there's like 10 that don't exist anymore. Or they tried it and they made it to like 10 episodes and then they gave up.
But
so,
by God, we have kept it going.
Yes, we have.
Through trials and tribulations and pandemics and everything, we have stuck it out.
Yes, we have not thrown it in.
From my mild beginnings of living in a basement, sharing a house, to now renting a pretty decent one-bedroom. Having an actually stable relationship and employment.
Hey, we're doing pretty good. Now one of us just needs to get a kid. And then
God.
We'll be complete.
Would you settle for a cat? I might get a cat.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yay! Anyway, our personal lives aside, well, okay, to a degree, I guess. What you been watching?
Yeah, this is kind of personal, I guess.
I mean, it's more personal than most other things in our lives.
But you're right about that, at least. So I watched a couple of things during this last little break that we had. The first one I'm going to talk about is an absolute horror show that I decided to do.
Okay.
A bit of an experiment, and I don't know why. I just thought of it out of the blue, out of nowhere, and I did it. We have both been pretty vocal on the show and in our normal lives that we don't like Family Guy at all.
Oh, God, Jake, what did you do?
So what I did is I was like, well, I don't like it. I know that fans like say there's a seasonal drop off at some point, like there are for any shows, and there are probably episodes that people hate. So I was like, what are the most hated episodes of the show by the fan base? And I looked up a top 10 list, and I went through 10 to 1 and watched them all. Pretty horrible all around.
Jake, I'm pretty sure masochism is a diagnosable condition. I'm just letting you know.
Well, when I saw the Marquis de Sade, when I watched Waxwork a couple weeks ago, I was like, you know what? That looks good, but to me. So,
fair.
You know, that's where I got it from. But anyways, you know, pretty horrible, not funny, bad writing, just just things that, like, I don't think that there's necessarily a humor barrier, but things that I don't even think that I would necessarily joke about just because I don't find it funny. So it was hard to get into it. I have to say, the number one most hated Family Guy episode, according to the list that I found that fans apparently disliked to hell and back, and it has the lowest rating on IMDb, I actually liked it. It was the only one that I liked.
Huh. Okay, what was the worst one you saw then? Oh, well, I'll let you describe that, but then tell me which one was the worst to you.
So, this one, the only reason I can think of that a bunch of fans hate it is because it's not as Family Guy as other episodes, I guess. I think it actually has an interesting premise. So it's a fully animated, voice-acted, like, normal episode of Family Guy. But over it is, like, the main characters in the studio doing, like, a DVD commentary about this episode that never aired in its original form, so it's not like it's not like you saw it. So it's interesting because they went through all this trouble to fully animate and voice act a new episode of the show, and then put dialogue over it like the characters are actors and they're talking about this episode they recorded. And I think it's actually really fascinating. It's a neat idea for an episode of a show.
Yeah, that's some fun meta humor.
And I guess people hated it because all of the normal Family Guy jokes are in the background and you can barely hear them because they're covered up by a fake commentary. That's the only reason I could think of that people don't like it.
Man, that might be my favorite one ever then. It's like all the comedy is happening when I can't see or hear it. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, you can still see it.
Well, yeah, but still.
Yeah, you definitely. It's hard to hear it, I'll say, but you still can, if you really listen for it. And I really like that. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, but the one I hated the most, there's one where, like, Stewie thinks Brian's not paying enough attention to him, so he gets himself pregnant with.
I don't please don't finish that sentence. I do not.
That's why I stopped.
There is I don't need to know. I have brain cells that are now dedicated to that, Jacob.
You asked me.
I know. It's I have damned myself to my own self-burial, but still.
So yeah, that was the little test that I did. I think it's hilarious that the most hated episode of the show is, like, one of the only ones I actually liked.
It's one of the ones with an actual unique aspect to it, which is, like, if there's no more damning nail in a coffin of Family Guy, it's that its worst episode is when it actually does something creative.
Yeah, that's usually when people hate stuff, is when you try to innovate a little bit. That's why Doug Walker's follow-up show failed, whatever the hell that was called.
That's why Seth MacFarlane's, directing career was fucking bullshit.
You didn't like Ted 2?
I would have preferred to have cut off one of my toes.
Well, that's an interesting premise, I think.
Yeah. I would have rather watched a 2-hour film of me watching myself when I had cut off my own toe.
I'll agree with you. I'm on board.
Okay.
Let's do it. Yep. Okay. So, besides that shit show, there were 2 films that I watched. One was Stay Tuned, I believe, a 1992 film. Sort of, it actually kind of has similarities to Waxwork and Waxwork 2, which I talked about last time. In that it has a lot of different settings and locales, because the whole premise is that John Ritter and whoever he's married to in the movie get sucked into a demonic television, and they have to survive through a bunch of different channels for a certain period of time.
Like you do.
Of course. And I kind of like it. It has elements of black comedy, but I don't think it goes far enough with those elements to truly be a black comedy. So it's like a normal run-of-the-mill family comedy, and then every now and again something dark will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it goes far enough. And of course Jeffrey Jones is in it, which makes anything uncomfortable anymore. May he never have a career again.
Right.
And Eugene Levy's in it, and he's like putting on a voice, and I thought that was strange. I'm used to him just being American Pie Dad, so anytime I see him in anything else, it is weird to me. And there was something else about that, but I forget. Oh, I remember. One segment of the movie is a cartoon. And it's a fully animated and voice acted like short that they're trapped in, and it's animated by Chuck Jones. So it looks like a mid to late 1970s Looney Tunes cartoon. And I really like that. I thought that was a nice touch. So, not terrible.
All right. Well, you have a very wide range of things you watch in our off time.
I try. Sometimes I just see what's recommended to me, and I'm like, I'll jump into it. What the hell?
I barely watch shit.
Speaking of what's recommended to me, I have one more thing. A horror film from 1995 called Ice Cream Man, starring Ron Howard's brother, Clint Howard.
Okay. I don't know how to reply to that.
It's about a mentally ill ice cream man that kills people.
But of course.
Clint Howard's in it as like a deranged ice cream man, which is kind of interesting. At least he's like trying. Who's not trying though, or there are like two cop characters, both played by, actual people. Lee Majors the second, which obviously is the son of the $1 Million Man himself, Lee Majors. And then the other one was Jan Michael Vincent, who could not give less of a shit about being in this movie. Which I thought was funny. And I did not plan this. I swear I did not plan this. I just watched it because it showed up in my recommended. But David Warner shows up as the father of one of the main children in the movie. And he's like a priest. But I just think it's strange because we covered him in The Omen, obviously, but then last week I, on a whim, watched Waxwork without knowing he was in it, and he was in it. And then this past week I watched Ice Cream Man, not knowing he was in it, and he's in it. And while I was watching the movie, I was thinking about it. I was like, after this episode we're doing on Brewster's Millions, the next episode, without giving it away, he's in it. So... all David Warner all the time.
Welcome to WarnerCast.
Welcome to WarnerCast indeed. But that's sort of all I have been watching. What about you?
Well, my friend, as far as things I've watched, it's been a whole lot of nothing. At least that I can remember. I have, however, been playing the new game Ghost of Tsushima, which does have some film credit too, because there's actually a fun bit at the beginning. When you first start up a new game, it gives you the option to put it in something called Kurosawa mode, where it puts everything in Japanese dialogue with English subtitles, obviously, but then it also puts like an old school, like Seven Samurais filter over the top, so it looks like an old Kurosawa film. And I played it for a little while. It is nigh unplayable like that, but still, it was really cool.
I saw that it looks neat.
Yeah. So that's taking up my time at home. As far as time, I've listened to a podcast at work and everything called the Magnus Archives, which is fairly popular, I think. I see it pop up online every now and again, but I was always like, okay, whatever. This is some other random podcast that people on Tumblr are obsessed with again. But then I started listening to it. It's a anthology of like horror stories, and it's honestly, like I mentioned to you before we started the show, but it's the first like actual horror that's unnerved me, and it's actually kind of like being kind of creepy to me. So I've absolutely loved it. just like 20-minute episodes and all. I think I'm like halfway through it now, and I've been listening to it for like a week and a half, so it's pretty long. But yeah, that's been my other waking moments. I've been a little bit more paranoid now because it's been such good writing, but otherwise, pretty good. Highly recommend.
That's fantastic.
Otherwise, that's about it. I don't quite have the experiments that you have with your watching, schedule.
I just love to just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And, I mean, the best way to do that, unfortunately, if you do it, you have to regiment yourself and you'll subject yourself to a lot of stuff you probably won't want to watch. So it's not for everybody, but I do like to do lists where it's like, okay, I'm going to go through all the Disney films, which I still have a ways to go. I'm planning on finishing before the end of the year. But then also it could be like, I'm just going to, this actor I like Zelda Rubinstein, I've been thinking about, ever since I watched Under the Rainbow, I've been thinking about going through her filmography, because she has like 50 film credits. And I'm like, what if I just go through everything that she was in, even in a minor role, and just watch them?
You have way more patience than me.
Probably. There's not a lot of people that would do that unless it was for the purposes of like a show or something. I like seeing strange things.
We have very differing personalities, but also like the same personality.
They're different, but they don't clash in any way. I'll say we have a lot of interests that intersect, but in completely different ways.
It's like two different sports are being played at the same field.
Yes, but we're using similar equipment.
Yeah.
So.
And we're like playing at the same time, so it's like everyone's running into each other.
Yeah, it can be confusing, but it's worth it, I think.
Yeah.
So that being said, without an actual segue, I was hoping to get one, but I can't think of one.
I mean, sports, I guess.
Oh yeah, sports, fine. We're both playing different versions of baseball, like Richard Pryor does.
Brewster's Millions.
It's Brewster's Millions this week. Okay, so we're going to start off with Brewster's Millions 1945, directed by Alan Dwan, I want to say. Montague L. Brewster, played by Dennis O'Keefe, is a newly discharged American soldier back from fighting in Europe during World War II. He rushes to his home in New York City to marry his sweetheart, Peggy Gray, played by Helen Walker. However, he has to postpone the wedding after he learns of a strange windfall. His deceased uncle has left him $8 million, but he can inherit the money only if he can spend $1 million of it before his 30th birthday, October 13th, 1944, which is only 2 months away, and he is not allowed to keep any assets. The lawyer explains that Brewster's uncle hoped it would make him so sick of spending that the rest of the fortune would not be wasted. The conditions include not telling anyone what he's doing, to which Brewster reluctantly agrees. He sets up his own investment company, Brewster & Company, and hires his wartime buddies Hackey Smith, played by Joe Sawyer, and Nappy Harrison, played by Herbert Rudley, as vice presidents, and Peggy, of course, as his private secretary. However, despite his best efforts, most of his schemes to lose money become profitable. Worse, Peggy becomes jealous of Brewster, spending a great deal of time, first with socialite Barbara Drew, played by Gail Patrick, then later showgirl Trixie Summers, played by June Havoc, even though he is only using them to help squander the million. Smith and Harrison, thinking that Brewster has gone crazy, begin to thwart his schemes. At the same time, Peggy breaks up with Brewster, but her wise mother persuades her to go on a costly cruise with him and the cast of a failed play that he financed after Smith and Harrison closed it down. During the cruise, Smith and Harrison stage a rebellion by confining Brewster to his quarters and ordering Brewster's chartered yacht turned around to return to New York. When the yacht is disabled by a leftover U-boat mine, he escapes and goes to the bridge to order the captain to radio for help. Brewster learns that getting a tow from a passing Brazilian freighter to a nearby Florida port will cost him a huge salvage fee of $450,000. He becomes jubilant, realizing that the fee, the cost of the cruise, and the losses from the failed stage play will use up his $1 million. Several days later, as the deadline approaches, Brewster is back in New York at Peggy's house with the receipts of his spending sprees, thinking he has met his goal, only to have his friends present him with $40,000 that they've recovered from his failed ventures. Luckily, he is able to get rid of the money by paying the executor's fee, an old $10 debt, and $2 for a cab fare, just before time runs out. Having secured his inheritance, Brewster then takes Peggy out, saying that they have to go downtown to the nearest justice of the peace to get married right away. On the way out the door, he is confronted by a door-to-door salesman. The salesman tries to sell an item for 2 cents more than it costs in a store. For this reason, Brewster throws him out, showing that he has truly learned the importance of money. And now for Brewster's Millions, 1985, directed by Walter Hill. Monty Brewster, Richard Pryor, is a minor league baseball pitcher with the Hackensack Bulls. He and his best friend Spike Nolan, the catcher for the Bulls and played by John Candy, are arrested after a post-game bar fight. A man offers to post their bail if they will come to New York City with him. At the Manhattan law office of Granville and Baxter, Brewster is told that his recently deceased great-uncle Rupert Horn, who he has never met before, has left him his entire $300 million fortune, but only if he can complete a challenge with several conditions. Brewster can choose to receive $1 million up front or attempt to inherit the whole estate by spending $30 million in 30 days. In the former case, the law firm becomes the executor of the estate, collecting a fee for performing this service and dividing the remainder among several charities. In the latter case, similar rules apply to the 1945 film, just a little more specific. If he fails to spend the entire $30 million, he forfeits any remaining balance and inherits nothing. Brewster decides to take the $30 million challenge, and Angela Drake, a paralegal from the law firm, played by Lynette McKee, is assigned to accompany him and keep track of his spending. Brewster, who has never earned more than $11,000 a year, rents an expensive hotel suite at the Plaza Hotel, hires personal staff on exorbitant salaries, and places bad gambling bets to squander his millions of dollars. However, Spike makes good investments, earning Brewster money. Realizing that he is making no headway, Brewster decides to run for mayor of New York City and throws most of his money at a protest campaign urging a vote for none of the above. The two major candidates threaten to sue Brewster for his confrontational rhetoric, but they settle out of court for several $1 million. Brewster then hires the New York Yankees for a 3-inning exhibition against the Bulls, with himself as the pitcher. He is forced to end his protest campaign when he learns that he is leading in the polls as a write-in candidate. The job carries an annual salary of $60,000, which would be considered an asset under the terms of the will. Blowing his last $38,000 on a party after the game, Brewster becomes fed up with money and is heartbroken that Spike, Angela, and others around him do not understand why he's doing his actions. Remember, he is not allowed to tell anybody, as in the 1945 film. On the final day, he finds that the sycophantic treatment he received from his entourage is gone. Shunned by everyone he knows, Brewster makes his way to the law office. Having withdrawn from the election, he learns that the city voted none of the above, forcing another election in which none of the previous candidates are running. Warren Cox, a junior lawyer from the law firm and Angela's fiancé, played by Stephen Collins, had earlier been hired by Brewster to assist in redecorating Brewster's apartment near the beginning of the film. However, he has also been bribed by the firm to ensure that Brewster fails to spend the entire $30 million. So, moments before time expires, Cox hands Brewster some money previously thought to have been spent and informs him he is not broke. Brewster punches Cox, who threatens to sue and declines Brewster's offer of the money as compensation. Realizing that Brewster will need a lawyer, Brewster pays the money to Angela as a retainer. With the transaction completed and all of the money now gone, Brewster fulfills the terms of the will and inherits the entire $300 million.
Hooray! Money!
The cause of and the solution to all of life's problems.
Depending on who you are.
Of course, as always. And now, real quickly, I will do a full circle here. So we have a number of them this time around, roughly 8, I believe. So we will go through and discuss if needed. So firstly, we have Dennis O'Keefe, who was Montague L. Monty Brewster in the 1945 Brewster's Millions, and before has been covered on this show, uncredited as Burke's party guest in 1937's A Star is Born, and uncredited as a nightclub patron in 1932's Scarface. As we've discussed before, a lot of the extremely old movies, extras were just passed around studios, so it makes sense. Next, we have Eddie Rochester Anderson, who played Jackson in Brewster's Millions, 1945. He was also Max's butler James in What Price Hollywood, 1932, and he was the second cab driver in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which I knew I remembered him from somewhere, I just couldn't place it.
Oh, yeah.
Very familiar. Next, we have Neil Hamilton, who was Mr. Grant in the 1945 Brewster's Millions, and he was Lonnie Borden in 1932's What Price Hollywood. Again, old films. And with that, we move on to 1985's Brewster's Millions.
That's going to be difficult to say all the way throughout.
Definitely. We'll see. Maybe we'll come up with some shortening for it. In Brews.
I'm good with that.
So the first one we have is Jerry Orbach, who was Charlie Pegler in Brewster's Millions, and he was the voice of Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, 1991.
Oh. Huh.
Yes. Anyway, John Candy was Spike Nolan, and he was also Wink Wilkinson in 1986 Little Shop of Horrors.
Yep, that one I remembered at least.
And speaking of Little Shop of Horrors, we have Rick Moranis, who had a small part as Morty King in Brewster's Millions. He was Louis Tully in 1984 Ghostbusters, and he was Seymour Krelborn in Little Shop of Horrors.
Just gets around, doesn't he?
He used to.
Yeah, and he's about to again.
That's true. New Ghostbusters. Let's go.
And new Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, that's right. You told me about that last time. I forgot. Oh, I'm excited for some reason.
The end is never the end, is never the end, is never the end.
I remember that.
Yeah.
So next we have Peter Jason, who was Chuck Fleming in Brewster's Millions, and he was the soccer coach in 1984's The Karate Kid. I have to say, I think this is the first Karate Kid mention in Full Circle in probably over a year. I keep forgetting we did that one.
Yeah. It's weird to think back. It's weird to think back on like, oh yeah, we did that movie, didn't we?
Wow, look at the ones that we did.
Look how far we've come.
And lastly, saving the biggest name, well, arguably the biggest name for last, Richard Pryor was Montgomery Brewster in Brewster's Millions, and he was the balloon vendor in the 1979 The Muppet Movie, which of course ended up taking Gonzo into the stratosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And that's your lot.
Well, a whole bunch of people.
Definitely. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can hear the strain in your voice.
I'll mask it.
It's and I've mentioned it before, like I've jokingly said, like, the choices you tend to pick tend to be a bit more out there, things I wouldn't expect. However, this time around, you've somehow found a second case of two wacky, like a remake of wacky, hijinks involving a monetary prize in the form of this and Mad, 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 Mad World. And Rat Race, obviously. I was watching through the 45 version, and once I was done with that, I kind of realized it was like, wait a minute, this whole setup seems vaguely familiar. And
hey, what do you know?
Yeah, it's like I'm surprised to have seen two of those. It's like I'm reminded. It's like it's like a line from Phineas and Ferb. It's like Doofenshmirtz or something. It says, "If I had a nickel for every time such another thing happened, I'd have 2 nickels," which isn't a lot, but it is surprising it happened twice.
line. And hey, both episodes had Eddie Anderson, as we just covered, so
Oh, yeah.
maybe there's something to it. Maybe he brings that special magic.
Of people losing their minds over making money.
Yes. I also should mention, before you go more into any of your thoughts, I didn't mention it during the synopsis because he's kind of just... He's inconsequential to the plot. He does some things, but they don't really matter. But Eddie Anderson was sort of the butler of the Brewster estate in the 1945 version.
Yep.
And he is kept on at Brewster and Company doing various odd jobs for Brewster in an attempt to waste the money.
Providing color commentary.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, not like that. I'm so,
Not intentional there.
Didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry.
It's a phrase we understand.
We should mention that the character is black, like, in case that weren't clear. Eddie Anderson himself is black, not just the character. I'm gonna stop digging myself a hole.
And I mean,
just gonna move that one right along.
The 1945 film, I mean, he's a butler working for the estate, but it's not horrible, a horrible portrayal in that regard.
Oh no! Although I will say that this is just a trivia bit on the 45 one, and I will read it verbatim. Upon its original release, the film was banned in Memphis, Tennessee, where officials found Eddie Rochester Anderson's servant character had, quote, too familiar a way about him, unquote, and that the movie overall depicted, quote, too much social equality and racial mixture, unquote.
Oh my.
Yeah, good. Yeah, stay classy, Memphis.
That's a good trivia. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so...
But that being said, yeah, I mean, again, he's a butler, but at least there's some equality there. He gets in good lines. He's not too stereotypical, which is nice, and I think Eddie Anderson's a good actor.
Oh, he's fantastic.
To that end, I think the 1945 version has pretty horrible portrayals for every single woman involved.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it really is pretty firmly in either overly annoying fiance-wife character, annoying mother-in-law, sort of. Well, maybe not annoying. The mother-in-law was actually pretty cool. At least in most bits. But then otherwise, the showgirls and all.
Yeah, and there's one... It happens really early in the movie because it plays into the plot. But the fact that he's going to get married and he can't get married because, according to the law firm... if he marries her, she would be an asset, which is against the rules of the competition. And I heard that, and I'm like, oh, this is from the 40s, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like marriage equity laws were still a little in the dark ages.
Yes, all around unfortunate. But we've grown, I like to think.
A little, yeah. I mean, lots of people would work very hard to make sure some of those laws came back, but moving right along.
Yeah, let's just sit on that for a
minute. Getting real in here. Anyway, the 85 version sure does love baseball. What the hell?
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I'm kind of... You don't happen to have any trivia on that, do you?
I mean, I can look.
You don't have to, if you don't have it already. It's just that was a curious decision. It doesn't get in the way of the movie too much. It's sort of another avenue for him to waste money. But it kind of... he wastes his money... He spends his money in an attempt to blow it on the game. Which is like, we'll set this up and it'll be between the Yankees and us. And then... I don't know, sort of just a game happens for a bit. And it affects his character, which in turn affects, I'm done with spending all this money, blah, blah, blah. So it does provide character moments that relate back to the actual film itself.
Right.
But for... I don't know, a good 10 minutes of the movie is just hijinks playing baseball, and it doesn't have to do much with the movie at all. Outside of the fact that they start out as a pitcher and a catcher on this Bulls team.
Yeah, like, and I mentioned it before we started, but I'm almost certain it has something to do with, like, I think baseball was just super popular at the time and also super political, like you had mentioned. Like, you'd be like, if, a movie were set in the middle of football with a football gag nowadays, because, like, that's the more controversial American sport these days, it feels like.
Yeah, and I think the 90s was probably hockey.
Probably.
So,
I mean, hey, it's, now that I think about it, this is kind of a tangent, but I'm kind of thinking about it. A lot of baseball movies in the 80s, kind of going into the 90s with Angels in the Outfield. Then 90s, like Mighty Ducks and whatnot. And then obviously I've forgotten the other one. I'll move on.
Goon, unless that was early 2000s.
Yeah. And then as you go into the 2000s, you get a lot of football ones. I mean, there's like We Are the Titans, that one Adam Sandler comedy.
Oh, yeah, Longest Yard, Remember the Titans.
Yeah, Remember the Titans, sorry.
That
a couple
one
other ones.
with Sandra Bullock.
Oh, Blindside.
Yeah, that one.
So, yeah, we're actually able to kind of see the progression of that.
There's some truth to that. You got some points made there.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name of the hockey movie, but it's a hockey movie in the 90s where it's like the America versus Russia game.
Oh, Miracle?
That's like Miracle, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like thinking about it's actually been going along. I wonder what the next trend's going to be.
I don't know. I do like that we know a surprising number of sports films, though.
I'm surprised at that, honestly. I'll be real. I did not expect myself to get through like literally 6.
Oh, again, there's your lot. Have we done a sports movie?
I don't know if there's. I mean, with the changing of the times, it'd be kind of difficult for there to be a remake of one.
I'll have to look into that. That's interesting, even if it's something like the Babe Ruth story or something.
Yeah.
But I have sidelined this podcast enough, I will say. So
we will
back to the topic at hand.
We will bring it back to the topic at hand, kicking and screaming.
So yeah, you're probably right. That probably played a big deal into it. Besides, I guess, fleshing his character out a little bit, because I guess technically, the Brewster in the 1945 one did have a defined past as well, in that he was in the war, and that was sort of why he didn't really have any assets or money to speak of either.
Yeah.
Whereas in Richard Pryor's case, it's because he's on this failing nothing minor league baseball team. But they don't play into it in the 1945 one as much. It's not like, I'm going to spend a lot of money on a Civil War reenactment or something. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, for all intents and purposes, the Brewster in the 45 version was a pretty stand-up guy. Him coming back and everything, he seemed very much like the doughy-eyed, soldier boy coming back to his wife, yada, yada, yada. But for all that it showed about him, I really didn't get the impression that he'd be this kind of maniac about this whole situation. I mean, like, it's just seeing how he, reacted to it and how he's acted kind of like a scumbag. It was kind of, maybe not scumbag, but certainly not great. Seeing how he reacted to all of it, it was hard to believe. The Brewster in the, 85 version, definitely a bit more believable. Just, borderline bum, just kind of trying to skirt by with what he's got. It's like, okay, yeah, no, sure, I can see that a bit more believable. Whereas, and also, for God's sake, the family in the 1945, they're not exactly poor off.
Oh no, definitely not.
We see them coming back. They're living in a townhome in New York, I think, or Chicago. I can't remember. They're living in a townhome. They have a servant. They're in this grandiose house with multiple bedrooms and all. For all his his war buddies to come back with him to have their own rooms. And they're having cocktails and all. They're all dressed up in suits. It's this glorious apartment. It's what kind of money did these guys have that $7 million is a whole lot to, or an extra $8 million rather, is a whole lot more to go crazy over.
Yeah, I don't understand that bit. I guess maybe it's sort of, I mean, that's a lot of money anyways, but I
Right.
guess more so it's him or it's his. Maybe that's the line of thinking. He doesn't want to mooch off of that family or his mother-in-law.
That's a good point.
I guess
Plus,
that might play into some of it.
plus it did, it did kind of get to me a bit more when I saw in the trivia $1 million at 1945 by modern standards would be about 14 million. So it's like, okay, yeah. That's, and then multiply that by 8. So
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And I mean, if we're going off 1985 movies rules, which has like a wimp clause where you can just take the million, I think I'd take the million. I don't have a mind for any of that other stuff.
yeah,
I'm not greedy.
Yeah, like I don't know how I'd manage that sort of stuff. Like in the fact that you'd have to have nothing by the end of it, which is like, okay, fucking can't.
That's
Yeah, that's just it boggles the mind to think about. It's like, whereas $1 million, it's like, okay, I can take this, I can pay off all my debt, and I can nearly live off the interest if I just put it in a couple decent investments, and I'm fine.
right. And that's the thing that kind of boggles the mind too, is because there were points during the film, like the 1985 one, I mean, where he buys things that I feel like would be considered assets, but they don't come into play. Like he rents a bunch of furniture and he rents the rooms, so at the end of the 30-day period, that stuff goes away, so it doesn't count as an asset. But did I miss something in the film because he buys the baseball team to manage it? Does he lose it? Did he give it away?
I thought he
Is
just
that legal?
I thought he just like rented the team or something. Like he bought out like some time from them.
I guess that could have counted too. I just don't. Of course, unless I missed it, which there's a lot of fast-paced stuff going on in both of these movies, but unless I missed it, I don't remember him saying that he was renting out the team. I feel like, especially at the beginning, he made it sound like he was buying the team to get them a new stadium.
Right.
And then maybe he sold the team and then used that money for the party. I don't know.
Yeah. It kind of did go at a breakneck pace. I think, like, the most I can think of is that if it's like a something you buy, like if you had bought like furniture and clothing, that sort of thing, it has to genuinely be like a valuable asset that's basically just like investing in gold. It's like if you buy like clothing or a car or something, that depreciates in value the moment you take it out of the store. And so if it's something like solid, like he bought that super expensive stamp and all that sort of things, like that would be considered a rare commodity that you could barter with, essentially.
Which, by the way, I think that's probably my favorite bit in the movie.
Yeah, that was
that
fun.
He buys a stamp and then mails it.
Yeah, which I think that was an actual thing, like the inverted Jenny.
Oh, it definitely is, and I only remember because there's a Simpsons episode from the 90s where they're all at like a flea market and Homer's going through a box at some lady's stall. I don't remember who the woman was, but the joke is that he keeps finding rare items and then throwing them aside, and one of them is a bunch of upside down airplane stamps.
I only know it because I was just a Wright Brothers fan.
Ah, of course.
Because like
you're some Wright Brothers stan.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. I just like airplanes, and plus we learned a lot of history of it because I lived in North Carolina in my youth, so like they keep crediting them being the first flight since the first flight was actually at Kitty Hawk, even though the Wright brothers were from Ohio. So it's like I don't know if we can really credit this that much, but there's not much else you could really claim about North Carolina.
Far be it from me to get in the way of state pride.
Yeah. It's like, what the fuck else is there in North Carolina? And I'm allowed to say that. I was born there.
It's like, I don't know. I've never been.
It's just cheer wine and racism.
That's fairly common, I think.
I mean, not the cheer wine.
Well, yes, of course. Back to what you were saying, though. Yep. That would make sense. You purchase clothes, and then it loses its value. That's why you don't normally, unless it doesn't fit or something, you don't sell it back to the store. It goes to a Goodwill or a garage sale or something. But that doesn't for some reason, the rich uncle doesn't even want him to have that. He can only have the clothes on his back. It's like, I guess he thinks those shoes are still pretty valuable, even after Richard Pryor's been wearing them.
Right. I think it's the idea that if it's something you actively use, like it's a tool or something like clothing and like vehicles and that sort of thing, versus like artwork or precious metals, it's like then like yeah, of course that's going to depreciate in value. Its quality lowers.
Right. And that makes it tricky too, because as per the rules, like I said in the synopsis, they're fairly similar to the 45 one, but they're a lot more complicated, probably because the 45 one was based on a screenplay that was based on a play that may have been based on a book. There were, like, they had 80 plus years up to the Richard Pryor film of people probably like, you remember Brewster's Millions? I would have done this and this and this. And they're like, okay, that's against the rules.
Yeah.
So he like says, you probably just buy a bunch of rare paintings and then burn them for firewood. You can't destroy anything with inherent value, which I would argue, what does inherent value mean?
From a legal standpoint, I think it means something very specific.
Yes.
Which I guess is the whole point of the game.
But then what would stop him from buying a bunch of clothes and then burning all of the clothes or throwing them out of a plane or something? Do those have inherent value? If they don't, why can't he keep them? It's just a big mess that maybe someone more intelligent than me could answer.
And I feel like there's plenty of legal yahoos have tossed this around any way better than we ever could have.
Let's go to the Legal Eagle YouTube channel and see what he has to say.
Yeah. But, like, going from that to kind of move away from the legal jargon, I was going to say, you brought up the rich uncle and the 85 version. It just kind of got me thinking about just the acting chops on... Not acting chops, but just how everyone acted specifically in both movies. And this is one of those rare cases where I'd always go on about, like, older movies, they seem like they have a bit more natural rapport and everything. But I'm realizing now, in comedies, it's kind of the other way around. Like, they feel very stilted in a lot of cases in the 45 version, where it's, they're talking about it's very hard to tell when something's specifically meant to be a joke, because everything's played very straight in a lot of ways. And just how we present comedy nowadays is a bit more blatant than how people may have presented comedy back then. Just like, when he's waiting on the phone, like, looking like he's about to faint, just from being told he might even just have $1 million in the 45 version. It just seemed kind of like, is he okay? Versus like, oh, he's genuinely like having a freak out moment, haha. But then the whole scene in the 85 version where it actually had the video of the rich uncle talking to Brewster, I thought that was probably my favorite scene. It's just I thought that guy was hilarious, and just how they were interacting with each other and how Brewster seemed to like reply to the video and their video replied back.
That's a good bit. That's something that I've always loved.
I've loved that bit. It's like, how am I supposed to do that? By doing this, stupid. It's like,
and what's best is that I say this on the show all the time, is that what really hurts comedy is if you don't trust. I'll say this as a general rule, and I'm definitely not the one that invented it. The worst thing in comedy is to have a lack of trust in your audience.
Yeah.
If you don't think that they can get the joke based on the joke itself and you have to explain it, then it's not well written. And in a poorly written movie, they would have had Richard Pryor say something, and then his rich uncle responds to him, and then it cuts back to Richard Pryor doing a double take, or it cuts to him like turning around to the man in the seat behind him being like, did you hear that? Or did he just say that? Or something like that. But instead, it keeps going. It's naturally funny. The audience themselves are like, did that just happen? Or that's crazy. But the people in the movie don't care.
Yeah. I think you just kind of put it perfectly the way I was thinking of it. The 85 one is naturally funny in a lot of ways. And I think that's just the comedy chops and everyone on display is pretty astounding. I mean, Rick Moranis, John Candy, fucking the main guy whose name I have immediately forgotten. Richard Pryor. Yeah, thank you. They ooze a certain charisma about them that just makes comedy pretty easy. Versus just, again, everyone in the 45 one, it just feels like they should all be doing different movies. Like they all seem better suited to like PSAs about the dangers of smoking and the dangers of wealth, whereas instead of being in this like comedy film.
I mean, just John Candy by himself. I don't think I've ever seen him in a role that I hated. Even Nothing But Trouble, which is a horrible piece of shit, with Dan Aykroyd overacting with millions of prosthetics and Chevy Chase being like a lump of wood. John Candy makes that film tolerable.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. I think he's funny.
Yeah. I somehow found the situations in the 85 one more believable purely because of just how genuine it felt like everyone's reactions to this odd world were. Just like how everyone just kind of rolled with the punches in a lot of ways. And then just the 45 one just felt kind of dry. It's like, dry is good for certain comedies, but in this case, it's a very goofball comedy. It's not like a very serious comedy, you know? It's like the whole premise is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, and it's supposed to be madcap, and they have the built-in rule that the main character, in both cases, is not allowed to tell anyone else why he's doing what he's doing, so that naturally creates tension and sort of an antagonistic way that the characters interact, which is supposed to build up the comedy. And there are funny moments in the 45 one, but I don't think it's as consistent. I think the most comedy that I can think of, obviously it comes from Eddie Anderson just doing what his role was made for.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like his earlier films where like earlier part of the film where he was talking about, it's like, I heard you were in the Navy, and then he like talks about like, you know, like all the just, I can't even remember the exact wording he put around about like fighting the Japanese and everything, but just hearing that I was like, haha. It's just like a genuine just like little chuckle at the situation. He's just very much, again, he's a man that oozes charisma, so it makes it very easy.
Yeah, he's great. You know what? I was talking about it at the top of the show. That Zelda Rubinstein thing, I might look up an Eddie Anderson filmography, see what he's always been in, and sort of comb through it, because that might be nice. I genuinely enjoyed him.
Yeah. You know, one of the highlights of the film, honestly.
And like I was saying, most of the comedy comes from him, and then because the character of Brewster is the one that's allowed to be the most zany and madcap, because he's the only one that of the main cast of characters that really knows what's going on, he eventually, due to how manic he is, he gets moments to be funny in the character. It's just in the 45 one, it's fewer and farther between. But there is one that I can think of that really got a laugh out of me. I believe they're on the ship, and he runs into one of the room's top deck in order to get the person manning the radio, in order to get his attention. And he starts talking to him. And in the middle of him talking to him, the man with the radio, he has a headset on. He takes it off, goes, "What?" And he just instantly stops. He goes, "Sorry." And then restarts his whole dialogue. And there's no reaction to it.
I'm trying to think of what that kind of joke is. Just that genuine moment of go on. Anyway, I've seen that in a few things, mostly cartoons, where it's like, you know, they're having some big dramatic situation, and it's like they're in the middle of a street, and they're like, "Oh, car!" And they move out of the way. Okay, and they go back to fighting.
Lots of instances of that, and it's a good way. Like, that's something that might naturally happen, especially if someone doesn't want to participate in the conversation.
Yeah,
because there's actually, I'm just remembering, I think there's a fairly similar moment earlier in the film where I don't remember which one, either Hacky or Nappy, one of his war buddies that works for him, is first coming into his office to complain about something that he's doing wrong with his money. And in the middle of this tirade he's going off of, Brewster picks up like a cigar or something and hands it to him, and he just stops his tirade. He goes, "No, thank you," and then starts back up again. And those moments are enjoyable.
Yeah, it's moments like that. Like, they actually do take dry humor into the situation and actually creates a nicer situation. Like, I'm trying to think of how the movie as a whole could have been made funnier in that kind of that very much 1940s style. But I really can't think of it. Just the premise alone, it seems like they were a few years ahead of their time. Like, this definitely feels like more of a stage play worthy plot than of a, movie film plot. Like, it definitely seems like there'd be a lot of kind of slapstick comedy that could kind of go into it, like, especially with a stage play.
Right, which it was.
Right.
And that's sort of what it was based on. And back to another earlier point that you were making, where a lot of them were sort of that, back then comedy was more stilted.
Mm-hmm.
In that sort of vein. I have to wonder if that's because a lot of comedy was adapted either from plays, which, not just comedies, but dramas, action, whatever, tend to be adapted from plays, but also a lot of vaudeville acts. And you have to, hit your mark, do your cue, say your lines, and something like a Marx Brothers movie, like that was vaudeville, and then it moved on to the big screen, and they handle it fairly well, primarily because the Marx Brothers themselves, in my opinion, primarily Harpo and Groucho, can hold their own and improv well, and they're doing their roles, but they feel natural. But if you look at everyone else around them, they can fall kind of flat.
Yeah, and I
wonder if it's just the adapting it from the stage that hurts it. I don't know if that's necessarily proven, but
I think we've briefly touched on it before. Like, I've talked about just even the difference in camera shot styles and everything between, like, even between the 50s into the 70s, just how different they could be. It really did feel like they were just filming stage plays for a long time, versus then, and you can definitely see it in the 85 version, films really kind of came into their own as their own art medium. So they were able to figure out, okay, we can have these deeper, closer in shots. We can have these situations that are very chaotic and can actually bring energy to the scene, rather than just needing to have more people on stage or having more loud noises or shaking the camera more. It's like we can actually have this situation come off as crazy. And that's sort of like, in 85, there's the moments when he's walking through like the department stores and the hotels and everything, and just all these people around him. And I mentioned it before, 80s films can do chaotic scenes perfectly. Like this, I think my go-to example has always been the trade floor scene in Trading Places. Just the absolute madness of the situation. It's like how they're able to perfectly portray it. And it just, you don't get that as much in older films, just because they really hadn't been able to kind of move past the idea that, okay, all grand presentation acts like this have to be basically just plays. They could actually be their own thing.
Definitely. And, I mean, not to mention, I think it also works pretty well in 80s movies, because you see it in an 80s film. And the 1980s are so defined by, like, the Wall Street businessman type corporate structure.
Oh, yeah, like the age of the yuppie.
Exactly. So you can definitely see this sort of madcap, everyone's crowding around, walking through a store or a hotel, and there's all these people. I don't know, it just feels right.
Yeah. It feels like the 80s just were naturally more chaotic.
Yeah, everyone was always having to go someplace.
Yep. Plus, the imminent threat of nuclear war probably didn't help.
Oh, definitely. We got to go to those places fast.
It's like, we might get hit by ICBMs before we get to McDonald's.
Today might be our last day to get a McDouble.
Versus nowadays, it's just kind of more tinged by, like, man, everything just kind of sucks. It's chaotic, but it's like, we've gotten tired of the chaos.
True. And we've also kind of, not to derail the podcast completely, but we have gotten to the point where those things don't impress us anymore. You have a massive crowd shot with millions of people running on a street while, like, a UFO sails through the sky, and it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. Which, it's weird. I really don't know what it was about the 80s that they were able to capture it perfectly, but I'll still see movies now. I'll see movies nowadays that try to have these big dramatic shots and everything, and they just don't do it. But I'll watch Independence Day again, or, Trading Places again, and it recaptures it all over again, because I don't know what it is. I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is fast and exciting, versus I watch something nowadays, it's like, this feels very muted by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because it's too perfect. I think because like in order to have something be chaotic, it actually filming it had to seem even chaotic.
Yeah, you can put yourself in the mind space of that, and it's like, well, chaos is happening on screen. How well do you think they managed that chaos? They probably didn't manage it very well.
Yeah, that's actually probably why I like a lot of Chris Nolan's films, because he actually, so many of his things, he is dedicated to doing practical effects, so you can actually feel the shots that they're going on.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I buy that. But you actually... Sorry?
But yeah, like back to it.
Yeah, you mentioned Independence Day. I don't remember when that came out, like 94, 95. And,
yeah, like early 90s.
Yeah, and there was a remake a couple years ago. Did you see the remake? Or not the remake, it's like a sequel. Or
yeah, the overdue sequel. I've seen bits and pieces. It's not good. If we do an episode on it, it's going to be very one-sided.
I was going to say, maybe that'd be interesting to look at in the future, because you specifically brought it up for its crowd stuff. I wonder how they compare specifically in things like that, like crowd shots or chaos, how they compare. So
we've talked about movies that have been like majority CG in the past. This one is so much CG. It's really not worth it at a certain point.
Look forward to an Independence Day podcast.
Cool.
At some point in the future, maybe next 4th of July or something. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, I think the 85 version is able to handle stuff like that better. Just like you said, the 45 one, honestly, as a whole, I don't think it has much going for it. I don't think any of the actors are particularly terrible, but it feels pretty stilted. There isn't as much humor as I would like from a comedy, even from movies of that time, and I've watched plenty from that time that are enjoyable and do make me laugh. So
yeah,
I don't think it's a generational thing necessarily, and it's not Kind of Women at all.
No, no. Like, even by the times, it was a little bit kind of weird.
We didn't even touch on the fact that I didn't bring it up necessarily in the synopsis, but what is her name? Peggy has had it with Brewster, so she goes home to her mother and tells Brewster she's not going on this cruise trip he has planned. And then her mother's like, "Oh, you're so independent, so much smarter than I was. I stuck with it with your father, and I regretted it. But you're independent. Being lonely isn't so bad." And she immediately is like, "I have to go on the cruise trip and force him to love me."
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I hate it whenever movies try to pull the spinster fucking thing. It's like, oh, an independent woman is nothing if it, like, will only ever become a lonely woman. It's like, fucking shut up.
You have to have someone else in your life to define you.
Yeah, it's like, fucking Jesus, people. Drop the Oedipus complex or whatever the hell.
Yep, and that is definitely kind of a thing of the times, but I don't know, by 45...
Yeah, like, especially given that just after the war, like, the position of women was actually pretty well high.
Yeah.
Like, there was the mindset of, like, women as subservient wouldn't really come around as a whole until, like, the late 40s into the 50s. But, like as the idea of the housewife became a thing. So, yeah, it's just kind of, it feels weird in this. Like, it's the kind of situation, it's like, like, you know, it's like someone says, like, oh, someone was, like, racist, but they were racist for their times. But then you look back on it, and they're like, oh, no, that's actually really bad. It's like, it's H.P. Lovecrafting it, but for women.
Yeah, I guess that... I don't know. I guess that wasn't much better. Because, like you said, it was in a slightly better place. They contributed to the war and everything. But then, you know, come the 50s and the 60s, we start getting those black and white family sitcoms, you know, a la the Donna Reed show, where it's like, mother knows best, keep a tidy house. So it kind of fell back a bit, so maybe it's not so.
Yeah, it was a pretty hard turn. You can even see in, like, advertising and everything, it went straight up into, here's the thing to make your life easier in the workplace, in the kitchen, ladies. Now use it all the time in order to make your life actually harder in the kitchen. It's just like, it's kind of disgusting whenever you look back on all of it.
Your husband will be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that definitely is a black mark in on the 45's version.
What do you like about the 45 version?
You
I
know,
do have one thing that I did like.
I mean, I'm, man, I'm honestly not too sure. Like, I think I wanted to try and say I think Brewster is a okay character, but I even mentioned it before. It just seems he just seems all over the place as a character. I thought in the beginning he'd kind of end up being a more upstanding guy, but as it went on with all the, and I'm sure that's meant to be kind of the point with the whole premise. But at the same time, even when he's first getting the money, he seems kind of skeevy. It's like, at first he's about to walk right out the door when they say he can't get married. It's like, okay, cool, this dude's going to have some honor to him. But then I realized, oh wait, there's going to be an actual movie. He's going to completely turn this around. And
Right.
as he turned it back around, I was like, I just don't like him as a dude. It's like, it's like he was so dedicated. He was so dedicated to his wife to be, and then just kind of immediately shunted her for this whole situation. I kind of thought in the end he wasn't going to get the money at all when he realized he realizes he doesn't need the money to be happy. It's like it was actually trying to play up the idea of money can't buy you happiness kind of thing in its actual form, not just, hey, even if you're impoverished, you shouldn't have money.
Yeah. I was actually surprised in both cases that I mean, I'm not familiar with the original play, or book or whatever, so I imagine that it's the same all around. But I didn't expect them to get, all of the money in either case. And I'm used to, like, the happy Hollywood ending. Everyone's happy, but especially with the 85 version, I expected it to be like, oh, okay, he didn't make it in time. He almost did, but he got the woman. He knows what's important. Something happens with baseball and he's happy again. Just because of the time frame and the money involved, if it was like the $1 million to $8 million ratio we were dealing with in the 45 version, then it's like, oh, okay, I can see Richard Pryor winning and getting that money. But $300 million to have a character win that as the end of your movie?
Yeah. It's like the end of It kind of feels like how at the end of Grease, like where you expected, like, oh, she's gonna win him over and everything's gonna be fine with her how she is, but it's like, no, she just totally turns into like this bimbo character. It's like, what the hell? That's the moral?
And then the car flies away. And I was literally stunned. I was like, what is happening?
Why are we doing this? Why am I here? What did I just watch this for?
I mean, the musical was kind of goofy. I was not expecting a flying car.
Yeah. Like, I know it's meant to be dramatic and stuff, but like we just went full chitty chitty bang bang. I am not cool with this. This is completely tangential, and I'm waffling at this point. I know, but it's just the one last thing is that I've seen just jokes online of people making their own Netflix collections. One of the collections they had was movies that end with them just fucking flying off in the end. It has Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Grease, and Birdman.
The Flyaway collection.
Yeah, it was the funniest thing. But yeah,
and I was leading it for you a bit with the 45 one to talk about sort of what you liked, if anything.
Yes. I don't know if I can really think of anything, man. Like, there are individual moments that are funny, but like I can't really say there's anything as a whole that I could say I was like, yeah, this is worth watching it for. Where that the 85 one didn't do exponentially better, had better scene, like it had better shot composition, it had better acting, it had better situations that really went along with the absurdity of the premise. It's like, okay, yeah, no, this whole thing is crazy. That this uncle sets up this ridiculous game. So let's just go balls to the wall with it. It's like he buys the Yankees. He has all these other things going on. It's like, what? He buys a stamp. It's like, what is happening?
This is crazy town.
This is absurd.
I will say, like, I mentioned Eddie Anderson to death, so I won't anymore. That's definitely something I liked about the 45 one, but I think the standout actual moment that I did like in the movie is he's kind of having a breakdown in his office, and Eddie Anderson has like a glass to the door and is like spying on him.
Yeah.
And he has sort of a psychotic break, and he starts hallucinating that this moon flyer he has is talking to him.
Yeah.
And
a little weird.
And it's fully, the moon is animated as cartoons in the past in that style, obviously, and voiced. And I don't know, just seeing that in a movie back then, that's not all that common. I thought that was really, really interesting and really fun to look at.
It's like, what is this Disney shit?
And you know what? I was actually curious about... I was like, okay, first of all, I want to know who voiced the moon, and I want to know what studio animated it. I cannot find that information anywhere. I searched for maybe 30 minutes. I'd like to do a deeper dive. The one thing I was able to find in that amount of time was an animation blog spot where someone posted like a link to the YouTube clip of that scene. And they're like, the voice actor kind of sounds like this person who was the big bad wolf and whatever. I'm not sure who animated it. Anybody have any thoughts? And there was like one reply in the comments is like, I have no idea. I was like, that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Damn 1940s films not properly crediting people.
I know, it's
which I say
infuriating.
Which I say that, but as if, modern credit rolls aren't becoming basically entire episodes on their own at this point. But still, like, it's good to have that.
Yeah, you see a movie with a 2.5 hour timestamp on like Amazon, and you get to 2 hours 15 minutes, and the movie's over.
Yep.
You're like, oh, yep, here come the credits. And I believe everyone should be credited, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, no, like, I'm not aiming to say that. But just, like, when it's something that unique, part of the film, why would you not give some level of accreditation for it?
That should be at the near the top. I would put that segment, like, right after the cast list.
Yeah, you put that on the fucking movie cover. Like, it's like the, Little Shop of Horrors thing having, Jack Nicholson on the front. It's like he barely had anything to do with it, but he was the most interesting bit in a lot of ways.
And people know him now, so if you get the DVD, he may not be in the art on the front, but he's definitely like the name on the front.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, well, Jack Nicholson's in this. Everybody knows Jack Nicholson. You want to sell DVDs, don't you?
I'm surprised they didn't feature Bill Murray more on the cover of the new one.
Oh, the new Little Shop of Horrors?
Yeah.
I guess it's because past that time, like, Rick Moranis and... Vincent Gardenia was already an established character actor, and John Candy. Yeah. So I guess there were a bunch of people in it they could rely on, as opposed to the people in the Roger Corman version, which they got around. Dick Miller's in there,
Yeah, that's nice.
But Jack Nicholson, definitely broke away and became bigger than all of them. So
yeah, it's like, man, what? Talk about, like, aim for the star, like aim for the moon, land in the stars. This is more like aim for the parking lot and end up in orbit.
Yeah, you jump pretty far.
Yeah.
But so
yeah, we are waffling a lot now.
Well, I was about to say, do you have any final thoughts on anything? I think we have a consensus this time.
Yeah, like, obviously the 85 version is the superior one, just in every aspect. And honestly, I might watch it again. It's actually pretty funny.
It was pretty enjoyable.
I honestly did not expect myself to enjoy it as much as I did. It's not like, like set the world on fire for me, but I was like, yeah, if I see this again, yeah, sure, I'll watch it again. It's interesting enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like, otherwise the 45 one, it's just, there's not much going on. And the fact that I was glad that it was only an hour and 20, and so I was just kind of like, okay, that's over and done with, and just kind of moved right the fuck along.
Yeah. I have to agree. I think the 85 one is consistently funnier as a comedy. I think it's better, and it has more interesting elements to it. I'm not the biggest fan of all the baseball stuff in it, and that's not even because I'm not a baseball fan. I just think that it reaches a point where it starts detracting from the movie, especially near the end with the game. But it's not horrible, and there are definitely worse subplots that you could have put in there.
I'm willing to bet if I went back and watched the trailer for this movie, a solid 30 seconds of that trailer is going to feature baseball. And I'm all but certain that's the only reason baseball is it has such a prominent role. It's just to drag people in. Because, like, people see, like, oh, he's wearing a Cubs uniform, or like, oh, he's going against the Yankees. Like, that's crazy. I'm going to watch that.
Dumb. Yeah. Zoom in on a dumb face.
That'd be like if a movie trailer featured like the Broncos or something nowadays. Are the Broncos a good one? I don't know.
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's better. It was nice to get exposure to Richard Pryor. I've heard some of his stand up before. But this is my first, I guess, real exposure to him in film, I think, because I know that he was like, Martin and Lewis. It was Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder for a long time. They were the duo in a ton of films, like See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and whatever that last one was. I'm forgetting the names of them, but yeah. So I've seen like the posters for all of those, and I guess I saw Superman 3, and he's a side character in that. But this was the first like, oh, this is. Richard Pryor is in the movie.
And as the main character.
Exactly. So, that was some good exposure to that, I think. Very,
branching
very
out.
Enjoyable.
Yeah.
So,
pretty much all there is to say, I guess.
Nothing more to be said. But, so do you have any suggestions that you would like to pop off?
Well, I mean, I definitely said Trading Places before, which, like, if you haven't seen that, that's a fantastic movie. Obviously, it's Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy at their peak, so it's hard to beat it. As far as 45 films, I mean, like, again, we had watched Mad Mad World. That one was a pretty good comparison for the 45. Beyond that, I'm not too sure. There aren't a whole lot of big, like, a lot of movies that you can really reference back to this. Financial comedies, it definitely seems like there's more of them in the 80s. I mean, again with Trading Places, I'm sure there are more that I can think of.
The Money Pit?
The Money, I guess. I don't know. I don't know that one. If you want money and baseball but not a comedy, there's Moneyball.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was about, I can't remember. It's about some deal with like the Cleveland Browns or some bullshit. I don't know.
I feel like I saw that. It was Brad Pitt in that?
It was Brad Pitt.
And Jonah Hill.
Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I did see that.
It was some like sports gamble thing where they were actually building a baseball team based on statistics rather than like necessarily like fame of each player and that sort of thing.
All right.
Something ridiculous. I don't know. It's sports. I'm not even going to pretend like I understand sports even slightly more than just referential.
No need. This is a safe place.
If you've come here for your sports talk, my friend, first of all, seek help. I think you have a problem. Second of all, why?
Yeah, Sports Center is down the hall and to the left, sir.
I like the idea that we're just in the same building as Sports Center, but we're like in like a utility basement.
I'll go down and grab someone real quick.
Yeah, they don't even know we're in here. We're not even employees of the building. We just found a vacant space.
Shh, they're coming.
Oh God,
I can hear the footsteps.
Quick, give your suggestions.
So I'm kind of in the same space. I can't really think of anything for the 45 comparison wise. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing this recently either with actors or directors. So I'm going to pull this off with the director of the 85 version, Walter Hill.
Oh.
He's directed and produced a lot of stuff. I would say the standouts for me, personally, he directed The Warriors, which I think is a great, fun movie. It's about gangs.
Huh. Oh, The Warriors, yeah. For a second, I was like, I was trying to remember that for a second. I was like,
yeah.
That seems familiar.
He directed that, and that's a lot of fun. It's very thrilling.
Fun fact about that, it's actually based off of an ancient Greek story.
Future episode.
I mean, it's not a movie, so we wouldn't be able to.
We'll go back in time and see it performed at the Parthenon or something.
The Parthenon? There's a few things with that, but let's move right along.
In the Colosseum where the Greeks played. Anyways, but also a show that I have lauded constantly on this podcast. Walter Hill did direct 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. One of them is sort of so-so, but he did direct the first episode, The Man Who Was Deaf, and he did an episode in season 2, which it's literally in my top 5, called Cutting Cards. which there isn't even really any horror to it. It's just there's these two gamblers that hate each other. They're notorious gamblers. They hate each other. They try to avoid each other, but they both show up at this same casino. And the entire episode is them doing increasingly worse and worse bets to the point where they're like lopping fingers off of the other person's hand in a poker game and stuff like that. And it's just the extreme hatred these two men have for each other and where it ends up taking them. And it's a great episode of the show, and Walter Hill directed it. So go check those things out, I say.
Alrighty.
So I will, I guess I'll do all the socials this time.
Please do, as you do every time.
Yeah.
Like, I can't read that shit off.
No, it's okay. If I had them written down, I could send it to you, but I do it off the top of my head, baby.
Fair enough.
So, at It Remade on Twitter for updates about the show and possibly remake news if any more happens in the future. I've kept my eye out. We getting a lot of news about video game remakes, but nothing in the movie side. So,
yeah, we're gonna have to. Actually, no, I was about to say we got to start doing a game cast, but you know what? There's so many of those. I'd rather sell my soul.
I don't think. I don't think anyone's gonna wanna. We'll do that for ourselves and then not post it.
Yay!
We won't even record it. So yeah, that's at It Remade on Twitter. They Remade It at gmail.com is the email. Send us suggestions to better or worsen the show, especially if you have any ideas for future episodes of the podcast. I mentioned this on a previous episode. I just forgot to this time. I would like to say this episode, Brewster's Millions, was actually an idea pitched to me at some point near the end of the year last year by a friend, sort of a mutual friend. You know him at least.
Okay.
So that's where this one came from. I know I mentioned it before, but I didn't want to spoil the episode, so I didn't say what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what that was. So yeah, pitch ideas, and especially if there's something that I didn't know was a remake. Those will definitely be the first to go in.
We get surprised by that.
Pretty consistently for me, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead at They Remade It on Instagram. I almost said Pinterest. I'm not on Pinterest. We're not on Pinterest.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work.
But for the Instagram page, I have been slow to post anything on that. I've been working. I know I've said that multiple times. I've been working on more stuff. I just want to get it looking right up to my standards. And then I'll start posting some of that stuff again. Because I was having fun with that. And go ahead and subscribe and listen on any of your podcasting platforms. This past week, I actually went through, found a list of like 60 podcast services, went through, and I was like, okay, are we on this? Are we on this? We're not on this, so let's get on that.
Woo.
And I think it's safe to say we're on almost every podcasting platform that is officially out there right now.
You cannot get rid of us.
Nope. There's just a couple that I couldn't do because we didn't fit into their criteria for a show. Like, oh, is your show specifically for educating Hispanic Americans? I'm like, I don't think I should bother applying to this one.
Yeah. I don't think we've even done a Hispanic film, to my knowledge. We gotta get on that.
I haven't seen any, but I'll look into it. We need to look into a couple things that we mentioned this time around.
Yeah. I'm sure there's something.
Definitely. But yeah, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podbay, Podbean, all those sorts of things. Go ahead and rate, comment, review, share, do whatever you want. Pull people in, infect them. This is like Invasion of the Pod People or
One of us.
The Stuff. Yes, Freaks. All of those delightful classics. And that is it.
Just join the great and powerful cult of They Remade It. Okay, maybe not powerful. and okay, the okay and middling strength cult of They Remade It.
I'm gonna think on that cult thing.
Yeah, it's less cult and more just kind of like a fan group at this point, which I'm sure lots of cults have claimed to be.
This is a sticky situation you got us into.
Yeah, let's give Jared Leto a call. Let's see what he has to say about it.
No.
On that note, as always, I am your host, Stuart.
And I am your host, Jacob, who is a professional mimic that repeats everything you say.
Oh yeah, I get that. I
Oh
get
yeah,
that
oh
reference.
yeah. I get that reference.
Tool.
Tool.
I'm a dick.
I'm done.
Oh, dang it. All right. Good night.
Good night.
I've been looking everywhere, find someone who's right. Sugar man, just to talk to me. Why don't you take me home tonight? You were out there all this time. All the time could have been this fine. How could I ever been so blind? I got to you in the nick of time. Situation called for drastic measures. Looked like I was gone for good. The laughing stock of the neighborhood. I must admit it took my very best life.
How's it going, buddy? Tell him the good news, Eugene.
No, you tell him it was your idea.
All right, I got some good news and some bad news for you.
Well, tell him the bad news first.
All right. Here's the bad news. I did exactly what you wanted me to do. I got rid of all your iceberg stocks.
That's great.
That's the bad news. You ready for the good news? Yeah. Okay, here it comes. I took Eugene's advice, all right? Admittedly, without you knowing, I used the corporate name. I hope you don't mind.
No.
I made a couple investments for you.
That's okay.
What did I buy? I bought a commodity thing. I bought an oil well thing.
He just made you $10 million.
$10 million! $10 million, 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 $10 million.
Damn it! I'm right back where I started, damn it!